What's the harsh reality no one accepts? Some parents just don't love their children. I was reading an article about 10 things therapists don't tell you. And one of them was that many parents admit they don't love their children. This one scares me. Edit. Found the article. Not the most scientific. As to why it scares me, when my son was born he was more a stranger in my house, and it was not a love at first sight. I was happy to some extent but never felt like you see in movies. I talked with therapist and be reading about it here and there. Not uncommon for dads to have to work on bonding with newborns. Son is now 10 months and much improved on bonding. But you always kind of judge how you initially reacted and if that's who you really are, etc. It would help if people actually gave a thought into having kids and didn't just have them because it's what you're supposed to do. They're increasingly doing so. That's why birth rates are dropping like stones around the world. Hard work doesn't always pay off. Something I learned my first week in the corporate world, and again even up until all virus layoffs. A non-executive's value to the company is strictly dictated by which side of the balance sheet their compensation falls. Some people just don't get a happy ending. Some people never find happiness or satisfaction. People tell you that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but for some people there isn't. They never get to see any light, just darkness. Yeah, I once lived with someone like that. She was in her 70s, 80s, and I rented a room in her house for a few months. She was truly miserable. She told me about how she grew up in Turkey with an absent father and abusive alcoholic mother. She told me how she escaped her overbearing family by marrying an Indian diplomat. Then how her husband abused her for years, she was missing teeth because of it. Then when her family moved to Canada, how she worked for years for her husband and kids with no thanks. By the time I moved in with her she was all alone, living in low-income housing, yelling at her kids on the phone once a week about how they are terrible children who never visit, and ranting to me about how terrible her life had been and how many regrets she had. She was an awful person to be around, but it was clear she had lived a life full of suffering. A parrot can't say anything they haven't heard. Sometimes people who have only lived through malice and hate can't understand or reciprocate love. It's really difficult to do something that no one has shown you before. It's much easier to stick with what you know. All human beings are capable of being viciously immoral. There's a point where we can be forced or force ourselves to become completely animalistic. We can perpetrate murder and genocide, as just one example, and if justified to ourselves correctly, we will feel no remorse. We like to think that the only people capable of such horror are a minority, but the truth is that we are all capable of it given the right circumstances. There is a Star Trek film that deals with this. Nemesis. Basically a clone of one of the virtuous characters shows up hellbent on destroying humanity. The captain pleads with him at one point saying that the man he is couldn't possibly do the things he is. He is better than that. His blood is better than that. The villain's response: he is what his life has made him. More befitting here is I'll show you my true nature, our true nature. Mistakes do define you. The little ones don't, but if you make a big mistake, it will alter your life to an extent. Saying that they don't matter is a lie that will prevent you from diagnosing life problems later down the line. This is something I wrestle with a lot in terms of my recovery from alcoholism. I quit young, at 24, and have been sober 7 years without relapse. Despite that accomplishment, I have alcoholic neuropathy, nerve damage, that will never go away, no matter how long I'm sober. This is a wonderful accomplishment though. Quitting is so hard, even if you have every reason to. You chose life. You don't always keep the good friends you meet. But that doesn't mean you can't make more later on down the road. From the BoJack Horseman finale, and something I've realized and made peace with, I think there are people that help you become the person that you end up being, and you can be grateful for them, even if they were never meant to be in your life forever. Alexa, play Mr.Blue. Keep your good friends. You become the average of the company you keep. That's one thing people rarely talk about. You adapt other people's personality throughout your life. You start with your parents, your siblings and friends, then perhaps your first boss or teacher. Bad things will happen to you for no reason. I always liked this Star Trek quote, "It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life. For that reason. Some things just happen and that's the way it is." That quote made me start watching Star Trek TNG on Netflix. Without exaggerating, it is one of the best shows ever made. Edit. I've gotten some of the same questions, so let me answer them here. Do you need watch the original series first? No, I started off from Star Trek TNG Season 1. It was rougher than the later seasons. Episode 2 was really bad, but I read up on it on Wikipedia and found it was considered the second worst episode of the entire series. Haha. I'd recommend watching from Season 1 so you understand and get a better feel for the characters and just power through into Season 2 when things really pick up, with the Measure of a Man episode being considered the starting point of where it became great. I used to think it was awful that life was so unfair, then I thought wouldn't it be much worse if life were fair and all the terrible things that happen to us come because we actually deserve them. So now I take great comfort in the general hostility and unfairness of the universe. Marcus Babylon 5. A classic show, but I still consider this thought from the character occasionally. Beauty matters in how people treat people. Going from a skinny guy my whole life to becoming a chubby guy in about a year has really shocked me how people treat me differently. How do they treat you as chubby compared to skinny? I went the other way and holy cow, do people just react more positively to you? It happens often and noticeable. I'm a girl. As a teenager I was always bullied and ostracized for being ugly. After college I get snotty remarks about must be nice to be a beautiful woman and have everything handed to you. Can't fucking win. I have experienced this as well from being obese though part of my life, and recently I've noticed a stark difference in how people treat me too, to the point where people have introduced themselves to me again, thinking I was another person and treating me completely differently. At least the handful of friends that have treated me consistently I know have good hearts though. Some people just can't be saved. You could give them every benefit in the world, and they still could choose to throw it all away, and you can't do anything about it. This is a tough lesson to learn. People have to want to change. Nothing you can do can make people change if they are resistant to it. Sad smiley. Get some sleep, happy smiley. He has to want to sleep. There's just no helping some people. The world goes on after you die. The world went on before you were born. First impressions are a very fucking big deal. They can be. My partner is on the road a lot for his job. This particular week he was away with one of the big bosses of the company. Everyone in the office knew the big boss was traveling with my partner in the car. My partner got a call from a customer and had to ring the office to finalize the sale, all via the car kit. Office guy picks up the phone. "Yeah, what do you want?" in a super uninterested and gruff voice. Needless to say he left a lasting impression. Seems like it's not that important, but in a workplace that kind of thing stands out. I worked at a pretty small retail chain in Australia that was doing very well overseas. Every now and then, big boss from overseas flies over to check up on how things were going. All I've ever heard is bitchy things about this woman. Anyway, one unassuming day, this lady walks right up to the counter, and within 10 seconds I say, "Hi, how are you going today?" With a smile. This lady kind of awkwardly laughs, and my store manager laughs hysterically and is like, "OMG, that's Nicole, haha, you goof. How rude, you assumed she was a customer." And Nicole just looked to my manager politely and said, "Well, actually, you should assume everyone is a customer and treat them in that exact way." That was perfect. This was my first job and I was totally embarrassed, but it was flipped, and I realized that interaction actually looked great for me, and I immediately impressed the big boss. Stupid of my manager to try and humiliate me. Pain is inescapable. Not even acknowledging that pain is inevitable and preparing for it ahead of time can lessen it. You will be taken by surprise, you will be hurt, you will not enjoy it, you will not be able to numb it, and there is nothing you can do except take it on the chin.